Powered by Riverside FM.
A hex can refer to an evil curse or magic spell that can be placed upon a person. Its etymology finds its origins in German, where the word hexen is a verb that means to work magic, or to practice witchcraft. In medieval and early modern Europe, where the term originated, accused witches were usually women who believed to have attacked their own community, and often to have communed with evil beings. Yet, to work magic could also be seen as something positive, to perform an act so brilliant that it is a work of supernatural forces. Hexen then has been a fitting name for Raven Software, who, hot on the heels of their first title for id Software, worked their magic once again by stretching the limitations of the Doom engine with an ambitious immediate follow-on, 1995's Hexen Beyond Heretic. This dark fantasy adventure title maximised the three-dimensional potential of id's raycasting engine, with an adventure that stretched across multiple dimensions. However, despite all of Raven's best tricks, John Carmack's technology was more of a clever illusion than genuine 3D magic. Fortunately, id were once again innovating in games technology, embracing the new frontier of graphics accelerators and polygonal rendering. You've likely heard of their first full 3D game, Quake, a title that'll become very relevant later in Raven's discography. But like they had done for Heretic and Hexen before, id Software and new publisher Activision were betting that Raven Software could once again perform witchcraft and create a title far more ambitious than Quake, expanding on their dark fantasy adventure titles with a third entry. Although a supposed planned trilogy wouldn't materialise, would Raven be able to create a direct sequel that was, at least, a work of supernatural brilliance? On this episode of Bullet Time, we continue our look at the games of Raven Software with 1997's Hexen II.
It's tough to miss out on conversation about Hamilton and the Schuyler sisters.
So I've never seen Hamilton. I don't know what it's. I know it's about Alexander Hamilton.
You don't even know what it's about. You've never even heard of Hamilton. You're from the UK.
Well, that's the thing, isn't?
Who the fuck is that
guy?
The
play is about the guy. I'm sure Alexander Hamilton wasn't a fan of because this would be. Because it's about the Constitution in it, that they're writing the Constitution. That's
yeah, parts of it, yeah.
Okay.
It's about Hamilton. First half is during the Revolution,
right?
The kind of stuff he was doing, and then the Constitution, and then his kind of fall from grace,
right? So where do the raps come in?
The raps, they come in. Well, those are part of the Constitution.
Okay.
I don't know if you've never ever sat down and read the Constitution.
It all rhymes, does it? And it has triplet.
It's very lyrical.
It has triplet verses and Migo style call outs at the end of every line. That's pretty good.
Lin-Manuel Miranda he didn't stretch too far.
he didn't do anything. He just Elton John'd it. He put the music to lyrics. That was it.
That's it. That's all he does.
Oh, God.
He finds something pre-existing and sets it to, and that's how you handle it.
God. Speaking of handling it, hi folks, welcome back to Bullet Time, the video game podcast that analyzes the shooters that miss their marks. Once again, we are back talking about the games of Raven Software. This is the mini-series That's So Raven, and this. I don't know. Is this the Hamilton of Raven Software's produce? Probably not. I would say.
I was about to argue for that, that yes, it could be, but I don't even know how to connect the two. There's the fiber in my brain is not strong enough to force a connection between the two of them.
No, and you know what? I'm gonna say. Controversial to say, this is going to be, hopefully, this might be our most contentious episode in regards to, I think we kind of stand on opposite ends in our opinion of this game.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be interested, we'll have spirited debate about it, but, This is the game where, oddly enough, not so much the game itself, but what the context surrounding it. This is where the wheels begin to go off the wagon a little bit, which is weird to say considering that this is the third Raven Software title that we're covering. It's the fifth Raven Software title that they've ever made. And yet, this early, well, I guess we'll dig into it a little bit. But before we do that, folks, joining me on this journey through the Raven Software titles is the adept paladin of video game literature himself, Kevin from PixelLit.
Hello. I'm back again, and I keep coming back.
I know, it's like you're much like the Serpent Riders in the...
Much like the Serpent Riders in the very important Heretic Hexen lore.
Yeah.
I am here
exactly
as a villain.
I will say, I couldn't figure out what the bad guy's name was in this game, so I was like, well, if I'm going to have the trend of giving you villain names for all of this,
sure.
I couldn't figure anything out, so it's like, one of the classes, one of the difficulties, and so I just went with Adept Paladin. Quick question, what what class did you pick when you played Hexen II?
You know what's funny is I don't remember now, and I checked my... so I didn't finish the game. I did put a lot of time into it. I checked my good old games score. I put 4 hours into it. I was somebody who did a lot of punching, so I don't know if that was
like the barbarian or the fighter.
Yeah, something like the fighter. I think. Yeah. I think that was my game.
Much like I did with Hexen, I picked the warlock because my main thing of, well, let's say first-person shooter
game
engine. So I kind of want to go with the guy who is going to be able to do the long-range stuff, because this is kind of what this engine is built for. Although, I did do 2 playthroughs. I didn't beat either of them, but I wanted to try all the 31 flavors that they had of this Baskin and Robbins. And by 30,
sure.
And by that, I mean I played 2 different classes. I didn't play all of them. The first one was the Warlock, which is where I got the furthest with, and then the second one was the Assassin, because I was like, I should see what the melee is like in this game. I should give it like its dues, because Hexen I didn't really... In Hexen, because I played as the magic class, whenever it resulted in melee, it kind of felt like, oh, this is more... It felt like a failure state, like it does in Doom, where you ran out of ammo and this is like your last kind of means of offense. But in this, I'm like, no, I should give it a go. If they've actually gone to the effort of using... Yeah. Still not a massive fan of how they implement the melee.
Still didn't enjoy it?
No, I don't... Okay. I don't know.
I played the Paladin. I was playing with the Paladin.
Okay, so you were actually...
Because it was the gauntlet... It was the Paladin's weapons are Gauntlet, Vorpal Sword, Axe, and Purifier.
Nice. The Warlock was cool because basically his whole thing was he needed to hold a book in order to do his magic. And so it had the FPS interface of in the gun hand was his hand, like casting out lightning. But then his right hand, his left hand was also on screen, just constantly looking down at the book. Just constantly looking at the just like even though he's casting the exact,
just like hold on, enemies.
Even though I'm casting the same spell throughout this entire game, I just want this on reference, just in case I forget. Just in case I say the wrong bit of Latin or like in the wrong place. I don't want to accidentally turn you into chickens rather than shoot magic missiles out of my hand.
Right. Though the chickens would be objectively better.
I was going to say, was there a chicken... so in Heretic, and I believe in Hexen, there is the Eye of Ovum, which turns enemies into chickens. Is that in Heretic 2? Sorry, Hexen 2? I don't know if it's in Heretic 2. We'll talk about
Hexen 2, I never ran into it in Hexen 2. Yeah, that's a bummer, right? I mean, that should just be like... Really lean into that. I think if you're going to do that, I think you should.
They should have made that one of the classes rather than a
Chicken Mancer.
Yeah, Chicken Mancer. Yeah, you have a barbarian, you have a warlock, you have a You have a paladin, and you have a guy who turns people into chickens, and that's his only ability.
And his only ability is that, and he's a Southern gentleman, and he wears a white suit.
Oh yes, that's very
with a
true.
black tie, and he goes by the Colonel. Colonel Mancy.
He lives in a house where he has a bath which is full of constantly boiling tallow, and he's like, what can I do with this?
He's got his 7 herbs and spices.
I mean, I guess he was a colonel though, so he would have been. Do you command when you were a colonel in the army? Do you command people? Is that like a captain's rank?
Yeah, a colonel is pretty. The colonel is right below general. So yeah, that's pretty. It's pretty high up there.
Okay. I can't imagine.
It depends. It depends though. It's like because sometimes there's people. There's like I think there's like colonels, and somebody will tell me that I'm totally wrong. I think there's colonels that are specifically that high because they run a department that does like things like PSYOP or something like that, where it's not like a bunch of soldiers, but something
it seems
like that.
like it's more of a manner, like because the way that I understand the U.S. Army is that it's kind of levels of management where if you're a soldier, you're a private, you're doing the fighting for the most part, and then you may have a captain who may also do the fighting, but they're also responsible for managing the team and reporting back to their superior, who may be a commander. A commander themselves probably isn't getting involved in the fighting, but they are.
Right. They're colonels aren't. No, there's like captain is probably going to be the last rank that is actually out in the battlefield.
Yeah.
And then above that you have majors and colonels, which are just like they're in the back somewhere.
Like my aunt said about the further you move up the food chain in a place of work, the less jobs that you do, until eventually it becomes writing and responding to emails, doing Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints, and that is all you have to worry about.
That's about it.
Do you think the army's the same? Do you think they do PowerPoint presentations? Like,
I think they do. Yeah.
With all the screen wipes and stuff.
And then there's just star wipes, and be like, here's where we're invading.
Yeah, I was going to say,
star wipes to.
Is that how they saw the Iraq War? Is that they had the F1 zoom sound effect, and then word art just dissolve on screen,
and then word art, and it was like clip art, and it was that like rainbow clip art, and the arched text or something.
Pixie does sound effects. Yeah.
Yes.
Osama bin Laden's portrait doesn't like transition in normally. It's the loopy moving like effect.
It's the loopy sound, and it's like some sort of woo woo woo.
Yeah, exactly. they put ease in and out on it, and boomerang, so it went back and then did it again.
Exactly.
Folks, we're talking about Hexen II, the sequel to Hexen Beyond Heretic. Yeah, we are definitely talking about this game. A weird game in a couple of different aspects, which we will dig into properly. But first things to get out of the way is that, as we kind of alluded to on the last episode of Bullet Time, where we were joined by the lovely Evelyn from I Am Era, the YouTube channel, and we were talking about this was meant to be the third in a trilogy of Heretic, Hexen Beyond Heretic, and then this was originally planned to be a game called Hecatomb, which, well, I think to get into it a little bit more, we also kind of have to... We got to talk about somebody that we haven't brought up on the podcast yet, or maybe we did in the last episode. I can't quite remember. Even though we do...
I don't remember.
Even though we film these episodes all one after the other, absolutely, there is no...
100%.
It's all continuous.
There's no jumping around.
Yeah, of course. John Romero from id Software. Now, what do we know?
Oh, that bad boy. Yeah, he's the bad boy of game design.
Literally,
that's what he is.
The first rockstar game designer himself, John Romero, one of the Johns that formed id Software back in the 90s, along with Carmack, joined with Adrian Carmack and Tom Hall, and initially got his start at Softdisk, working on the Commander Key games. He makes pitched to Nintendo to say, hey, we could make Super Mario Bros. 3 work on PCs with John Carmack's tile technology. Nintendo turns them down, but they turn that into Dangerous Dave, and they use that technology to power Commander Keen. And then at some point, John Carmack is writing this raycasting engine, which draws Dungeon Wars really quickly, and they go, hey, why don't we turn this into an action-adventure game inspired by a game from my childhood, Wolfenstein. And inversely, they create Wolfenstein 3D, and doing so, the modern FPS. From there, they get the clout and the critical acclaim to do Doom, and it is through Doom that they meet up with a Wisconsin-based games developer called Raven Software. Raven, who used the Doom engine to do Heretic and Hexen. And John is kind of he's sort of like the executive producer on both those games, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah,
I know he's involved in some manner.
Yeah, I think
it's either
everyone at id Software is kind of like putting their fingers in it, because like Carmack tells them, because originally they're planning to make Heretic and Hexen way more involved and more D&D like, but then
even more ambitious than they made them.
Yeah, exactly. But then Carmack says, no, just make it Doom with a dark fantasy skin, which Heretic, I would say, kind of goes beyond. Well, Hexen technically goes beyond Heretic, but Heretic, I'd say, goes beyond Doom in regards to. No, they do a lot more with the concept in regards to having an inventory and kind of, you know, they take the lock and key, you know, world structure that the Doom games have, but manage to dress it up in fantasy tropes, which works really well. And then Hexen is the next step ahead, because you have like multiple player characters with different stats. You have like a hub world and, you know, different kinds of magic. It is really quite impressive what they do with it, but a lot of it is because John Romero is kind of their guardian angel and is like, because they're public, id has the clout to publish these games as well at this point, and it's like, yeah, whatever budget you need, whatever help you need, like I think they they provide feedback on it. They give them ideas. I think they help QA the projects as well. But eventually, though, they do plan this third game in the series called Hexen II, which is meant to be like the ultimate like version of what they're planning. It's meant to be, well, at this point, id are already working on what their next game's going to be, which is going to move away from raycasting and embrace full polygonal.
Full-on 3D, baby.
3D. They watched the
Give me those polygons.
They watched the Lawnmower Man that weekend and said, "Why don't we have a game that looks like this?"
Yeah, boy.
And eventually, they would. Well, they would try to. Rare would look at that, and they would get it halfway there, because they would just make a game with a 3D game with Pierce Brosnan in it, and go, "Oh, it's not quite the Lawnmower Man. Let's make it a Bond game." There we go. No one will know. God, I think they did make a Lawnmower Man game for the SNES, though, didn't they?
Oh, I'm pretty sure they made. I feel like anything that was a marginal success in the '90s had its own tie-in video game.
Oh God, yeah, because
the movie tie-in video game is not quite a thing.
Not anymore, no.
Anymore, but in the '90s that was hot. I mean, you had the
Aladdin and the Lion King, which have like actual
True Lies. True Lies actually had good. It was a pretty.
I was going to say, you haven't played True Lies. Yeah, so the SNES game True Lies is made by it's published by Ocean, but it's developed by the Bitmap brothers, who did Chaos Engine for the. Well, they did a bunch of like Amiga games, but one of the ones they did is Chaos Engine, which is like. Well, basically, it's like the version of Nex Machina, the game that Housemarque would eventually make. Like, it's Smash TV, but with a plot to it. And so, yeah, they make True Lies, which is, again, a really solid top-down shooter.
Very much Smash TV. Yeah, I like top-down shooter.
I like it more than Zombie 88 My Neighbors, which is like the only other example of like a decent top-down shooter on the SNES.
Yeah, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, a Lucasfilm LucasArts game, which is one of their only forays into that kind of game, really.
Yeah, they do a sequel called Ghoul Patrol a few years later, which they try and like make it a bit more mature. But it's funny. It's like, yeah, I don't know. LucasArts I always think is an interesting thing in regards to just. Well, I found out why this was the case. Why it was like, why didn't you just make Star Wars games like from your like initial thing? And my thought was always that George was like, no, don't do your own thing.
They were not allowed.
Yeah, because Atari owned the rights to make Star Wars games until the 90s.
I remember talking to, I interviewed David Fox a few years ago, and he was one of the first employee. I think he was employee number 2 at Lucasfilm Games, and his first idea was he came up with this whole like a flight sim type game, and he's like, oh, and it could be like Star Wars and all that stuff, and he pitches it, and they're like, George is like, no, it can't be Star Wars. So.
And that becomes Red Baron. Oh, it becomes Secret Technologies.
No, that becomes that's I think it's Attack on Fractalus.
That's
Is Rescue on Fractalus is the game that it becomes ultimately. 1985's Rescue on Fractalus so that's the game that David Fox designed thinking with Star Wars in mind, and then they tell him he can't use Star Wars.
That's so bizarre that they have to do like at Star Wars while working under George Lucas. But
they couldn't touch it. They couldn't touch it until the 90s.
Well, yeah, when the finally whatever fucking sweetheart deal they wrote for Atari finally ran out. So
exactly.
God, and to think that we only got one decent Star Wars game out of that Atari thing, which was the classic Vector game that they had in the arcades.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but then they also did
that game was.
Yeah,
and you can't find that anywhere either.
No, and it's quite hard to emulate because obviously it uses a different
vectors.
Yeah, it's not raster based. It is. It's nearer to how kind of polygonal stuff works, which I guess dovetails nicely with at the time.
Right,
id Software are working on this full polygonal engine, which will eventually become id Tech 2 or
the Quake
engine. And so, again, they're planning to do what they have done previously, which is they're going to build the game that will demonstrate this off like as it is, which is going to be Quake 1.
Right.
And although this isn't a podcast about Quake, I do think that these two games do have a weird amount in common in regards to both id Software and Raven Software are D&D nerds, which I guess makes sense. The kids of the late 70s, early 80s. And at id Software, the designers, the Johns and Adrian Carmack and Tom Hall, had a D&D campaign that was ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And the name Quake comes from the name of the hammer of John Carmack's barbarian character.
Right.
And a lot of the concepts of the game, whereas Cthulhu Mythos stuff, that's a lot of Romero's ideas, which again comes out of this campaign where we've done Doom, we've done Hell on Mars, we've done Hell on Earth in Doom 2. I think we should get a little bit more, embrace this extra dimension by kind of making this more of a dimensional thing. Let's do kind of Cthulhu stuff. Let's, almost kind of planescapey. And so you end up with Quake, which has kind of less plot than Doom, but is but it's a total style piece. It's all done through tone. You have like harsh, rusty environments. You have like these enemies who are like kind of stitched together golems with guns. The music's all ambient pieces done by Trent Reznor, and much like Doom kind of riffs on, it's a playable heavy metal album. This is kind of like a playable, post-metal ambience kind of album. Is Quake is
9 Inch Nails adjacent.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is this is like a playable version of the Downward Spiral, essentially.
Yeah.
And as a result, that's why Quake has aged wonderfully, because once again, very Spartan in its design, but it is very much, it doesn't have plot. It has plot, but it doesn't have a lot of it. it's mostly done through tone,
Right.
and that tone is held up exceptionally well.
It has.
And they go to Raven and they say, well, let's do what we did last time, where you made Hexen, which was better than Doom, and now you're going to show off what you can do in Hexen II. You're going to all the bells and whistles of the new Quake engine. Let's see what happens with that. While it's software working on Quake, the Johns fall out with each other, barely talking to each other at this point.
They sure do.
Because Carmack is Mr. Tech. He's famously says story in video games, like stories and pornography, they don't really matter that much. It's just a reason to be there and to like get to the good stuff. While obviously Romero is very much more of, no, these need to be, you know, even if there's not a lot of plot, these have to be tone and style pieces.
Yeah.
But being the Rockstar developer he is, manages to get the clout to leave id Software and start his own business, which becomes, well, he leaves and he brings Adrian with him, right? Or Tom Hall, right?
He brings, so
because Tom goes back to work at Apogee, doesn't he?
Tom leaves first.
Yes.
Tom is I think John Carmack rubs Tom the wrong the wrong way first
because they keep cutting all his plot out of the games that they make.
Because Tom was the heavy story plot guy, right? He gets, and I think Tom Hall leaves first. And if the people listening are really, really interested, they can read Masters of Doom, which is a full accounting of this whole thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think Tom Hall leaves first. Romero is the Rockstar designer. Him and Carmack eventually makes me start to think it's a Carmack thing.
I think especially as we get later on in these games, and I think if we ever get to like Rage, I think it does very much put in. I mean, even now, I would love to talk about like the Carmack stuff in regards to, because he's not at Meta anymore. But when he was heading up their virtual reality department and he went on Rogan to promote it, the stuff he was saying was like genuinely dystopian in regards to, well, not everyone can have a private island or a Ferrari, but we can get that stuff looking well enough in VR. And it's like, okay, fair enough. And eventually,
he's got a weird. I want to say he doesn't seem to strike me as a guy with a ton of empathy.
Yeah,
for
he does
the way other people view things.
He's very much like the kind of like the evil nerd archetype in regards to. He's got an incredible technical mind for like figuring stuff out, but when it comes to basic human empathy, he's like. Yeah, like he would rather like progress is like number one to him over anything else. To the point that later in the Rogan interview, he goes, and eventually it might get to the point that you can't have a house anymore, or like whatever. But we can do all that in VR, and it's like, God, what a really upsetting
It's a very upsetting thought process there, Johnny boy.
Thanks, John. Much appreciated. But yeah, I think that's why not to be like, oh, this multi-millionaire game developer is my favorite, because at the end of the day, it's parasocial and I don't know him. Romero, I think, is especially like in. Currently, I think he's like sort of not like reimagined his image, because I think he's very been like, he understands what he was like back in those days, and it's kind of like, I grew up pretty much, but
he was like, I think the thing to remember is he was also like 26 or 27, and he had been given a shit ton of money. So I feel like
he'd been told that essentially he's created like the video game that they've made, Doom, is essentially it's the equivalent of like what heavy metal did in the 70s, or what even rock and roll did in the 60s. It's like this amazing, cultural shift, and you're like the person responsible for it. And so Eidos gives him the money to essentially form his own super studio, and they tell him, you get to make whatever you want, bud. And I mean, we'll get in. I mean, I think that we'll have to save that story for when we eventually talk about Daikatana, which I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you know what Daikatana is, and a lot of the stories behind that. But to go back to Raven Software, John is gone now. They no longer have John Romero as their guardian angel.
Their patron saint is no longer added.
And to add salt to the wound, at this point in 1997 or 1996, they're bought by Activision. Now, obviously, when it was id Software and they were publishing their games, they were like at a small enough size that it could be like, well, all right, we can, it's still the Raffles, Brian and Steve are mostly leading these projects, and then we got a couple of names now here who are happy to stick around, but as with most things, the more successful you are, the bigger the company has to get, to keep the success going. And I mean, that's kind of reflected in the fact that this isn't the only game that they make that comes out this year. They also have Mage Slayer comes out, which is basically the Raffles. They're leading the two different projects. So Brian is on Hexen II, while Steve is on Mage Slayer. Mage Slayer, by the way, we're never going to cover on the podcast because it is a top-down action game where almost like it's a bit like. Did you ever play Gauntlet? Back in the day, the arcade game?
Yeah. Oh, I played Gauntlet. It was one of those games that I always thought I was like, am I having fun playing this? I don't know. But I played it.
Not your bag.
I mean, it was maybe one of like 4 or 5 games we had for we had it for the Commodore.
Oh god. I think I played the NES version like years after the fact, but the one that was made by...
Yeah.
I think this one was made by like a Japanese developer, but it was published through Atari's Tengen when they were on the sneak. Haha, we're going to publish games on
And when they were being sneaky with Nintendo.
Sneaky boys.
It's like, we're not Atari, we're Tengen. Wink.
It's funny though, it's like, I can understand why this was like a really popular game at the time, because I guess it's the D&D concept, but it's a bit more action-packed, isn't it? It's just like you have 4 characters and you run through mazes like Pac-Man, but you're just like slicing and dicing through enemies. And I guess Mage Slayer is the modern equivalent of that, where they are using, some basic 3D graphics in it and a little bit...
honestly, looking at the screenshots, it looks like they could have... It looks like they could have used id Tech 2 to make it.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Based on the way the 3D rendering is done.
But initially the plan was that they were both going to work on Hexen, but then
right.
Activision buys Raven Software because, hey, Activision at this point, they have been taken over by Bobby Kotick, villain of video games, and I think he's still going to be around even after the Microsoft buyout, isn't he, from what they've said?
Yeah, God, yeah. I don't know what the deal is there.
Yeah.
Just as a quick sidebar, fuck Bobby Kotick.
Yeah, fuck him.
But there's got to be some weird contract thing that he's got going on.
Oh Christ,
that
yeah.
It's just way too expensive to let him go or something.
Probably,
like that.
yeah, or even just on Microsoft.
It's cheaper to just keep him on the payroll and stick him in an office than,
or even on like Microsoft's side,
him.
they're probably just like, well, he knows how to make money, so let's keep him around. And it's like, it fucking sucks. It's so bad.
I guess he knows how to make money.
And he also did star in big Hollywood film Moneyball. So, have you seen? Did you know that he's in Moneyball?
He's in Money. I was just thinking about Moneyball yesterday.
He plays himself in Moneyball.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know.
Oh boy,
folks! If you want to ruin the Brad Pitt 2005-2007 film Moneyball for yourself, remember that Bobby Kotick is in it as he's not in it for long, but he is kind of an important character in some respects in it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking of rewatching it. Now this has really put a damper on those plans.
So to dampen spirits a little bit more, so Activision at this point is like, and this is weird to think about as well, is that there was a time where Activision weren't like the most powerful force in games, because kind of in the early 90s, they're starting to kind of run out of steam after the huge wins of the Atari era. And then, they have a couple of stuff under their belt, like Pitfall the Mine adventure, but it's only until Kotick comes in and he kind of realizes, right, well, the way that the industry is going is that less stuff we do stuff in-house, but we need to bring people under the label. It's more we have multiple studios rather than a single mega studio. And so it's during this time that they buy Treyarch, who go on to do the Spider-Man games. They buy Neversoft, who go on to do Tony Hawk. Toys for Bob, who's this company that's been around since 1989 doing Star Control, but they bring them on, and then they work on all sorts of stuff and eventually become known for the Spyro games and rebooting Crash Bandicoot and stuff. But it's at this time that they buy Grey Matter Interactive, who will do Return to Castle Wolfenstein, but also Raven Software. And I did my best to research into why they did this, and obviously
why they bought Raven.
Why did they buy Raven? And I think that, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, all this news stories, you're only ever going to find, like, the Wall Street Journal stuff where it's just like, big purchase made today, and it's purely just like the Activision spokesperson saying, oh, we see potential in Raven and we want to work closer with them, blah blah blah, you know, kind of whatever standard stuff. My insane conspiracy theory for why they bought Raven Software is they were trying to buy it. Which they never do. They do get the publishing rights for id Software's games, which is how they end up again doing Return to Castle Wolfenstein through Grey Matter. Grey Matter, by the way, who have done the Quake episodes for id.
Right.
And they buy Raven, who are, like, id's proteges at this point.
Yeah, so it's basically, they get in there, they're like, all right, well, what's making, in the PC gaming space, what's making a shit ton of money? Well, id Software stuff is Doom. Well, we can't get id. What's the second best option? And it's like, well, how about the studio that is the most id-like studio out there,
who knows how to use their tools, and not only you know how to use their tools, but make better than id style games.
Yes, more they're the ones that mature.
They make the ambitious stuff, because that was what they were.
They make the ambitious stuff in the engine.
Yeah.
They really push these things out to the max, and they buy Raven, and Grey Matter, who is the two studios that kind of the two devs that kind of circle around id.
Yes.
Yeah, I buy it.
I know.
I buy into that.
And if anything, I think that your theory probably is more realistic than mine, where I go the extra step of, they're like, well, if it'd have to go for us to work with Raven, then the easiest thing would be for us to just buy id. Which I think is probably how they end up with the deal of, no, we still have 100% studio ownership, but we've been using GT Interactive to publish some of our stuff, which we haven't really touched on GT Interactive in the previous episodes, but we don't really need to. All we need to say is, one, I found out that the reason they're called GT is because they Good Times Interactive, a spin-off of Good Times Video, the Blockbuster style competitor to to Blockbuster, I guess. But yeah, they polished a ton of stuff back in the 90s. Like, they did all of Shiny's stuff, like Earthworm Jim and MDK. They did all of they did the box copies of Doom and the original Quake up until id then decided to do it through Activision, which is then when GT Interactive signs a deal with Epic and publishes the first Unreal game. And all of the advertising for that game is better than Quake. It's like a thing to be like, fuck you. We don't need you anymore. We have Unreal.
By the way, GT Interactive, in case GT Interactive is... you hear that name a lot in
and you'll hear
circles.
it a lot on these 90s episodes of...
In these 90s episodes, you're not going to hear it again after the mid-2000s because GT Interactive purchased the name rights. They are Atari now.
Yes. The most cursed name in video games. They decide to become... Because that's what happened to fucking Infogrames over in France. They have an enormous win with the first Alone in the Dark game. They buy Microprose and they buy Hasbro Interactive, and then they go, what if we call ourselves Atari? That people know who Atari are. Hey, we'll call ourselves Atari. That is a good idea. And
God.
Bang, everything's going down. God, because they published fucking Enter the Matrix under the Atari name, don't they? Which again, I guess that's the shiny entertainment connection there. God.
Yeah.
Of course, the classic David Cage game Fahrenheit is done under the Infogrames Atari name. So, nothing but wall-to-wall hits, folks, from Atari.
Yeah.
God.
Wall to wall.
Gosh. Activision has Raven Software at this point, and
yes,
they still are contractually obliged to work with it, and, we're still going to do that with that. But John Romero is gone. John Romero is no longer there to be like, hey, Activision, get off their cases, let them make the game that they want. Activision is pretty much like, no. We got you under the thumb now. We now are funding your studio. Which, again, I think that's like when a lot of people kind of go, why do developers want to be bought out? It's not usually a case of they want to. It's more the fact of you have to keep people employed and you have to keep a roof over your head. And the main way to do that is by having the backing of a publisher, because they will pay for that stuff. But that usually, especially in the 90s where this stuff hasn't really been figured out, it comes at the cost of losing a little bit of your creative spark. And that's kind of what happens with this, because Activision say, well, Quake's come out, and we want another Quake-style game to come out on this date. And they look at Hexen II and they go, no, this is
way too big.
This is too ambitious. This is too big. Let's King Solomon it and split it right down the middle. And so as a result, we end up with two games. One of the games we won't be covering on the podcast because it is ostensibly a third-person action-adventure game in the style of American McGee's Alice, which is very much on the line of, is that a game we are going to cover? I'm in the camp of saying no, because it's more of a platform game, even though it's Quake Engine.
Yeah.
And even though it does have shooter elements, I don't... Spiritually, it doesn't feel consistent with the game.
It doesn't feel right.
No.
Doesn't feel right, no.
This is Hexen II, which very much is a sequel to Hexen 1. It is, for all intents and purposes, an FPS game. But with a little bit of extra tuning to it, which this game comes out in 97, and I believe that this is the first this is the first dip on the Raven Software stuff, because reviews-wise, it does very well, which we kind of dig into a little bit towards the end of the episode, but sales-wise doesn't do quite as well as they were hoping. But with all of that said, because we've talked about the context of this game, but we haven't really dug into the content of this game, so...
Yeah, and before we get into the content,
go ahead.
Let me just talk about like what's going on in the world when it's released, because it's September.
Let's put this more into context. Yes,
it's September 11th, 1997 when it comes out.
Oh no.
Oh no. So the movie that is hot at the box office is the Michael Douglas film, The Game.
Oh,
which is it's a very interesting.
I have a fun
movie.
fact about that when we get to it.
Yeah. Yeah, go right ahead. What's your fun fact about the game?
Okay, the game, in the film The Game, Michael Douglas's father is played by Charles Martinet, the voice of Super Mario.
Huh. Interesting.
That's the only fact I know about that film, other than that it's a Fincher that I haven't seen yet.
Charles Martinet, and I feel like that's Charles Martinet, I want to say, is like the same age as Michael Douglas.
Yes. I think maybe like a few years older, if that. But Douglas is just—he's got that boyish charm to him. When I saw him in
boyish charm to him,
when I saw him in Ant-Man and the Wasp, I didn't think, "Wow, they got him out of the retirement home for this." I thought, "Damn, I bet he can still shoot some hoops."
I bet he could. Yeah, he's ready to go. Over in what's that?
I was going to say, isn't he like 40 in Wall Street? He is. Oh no, that's the thing. He plays the love interest in *Romancing the Stone*. At which point, that is like pushing 40 for him. God. And to think that he had this career beforehand, where it's like he had produced *One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest*, and basically, like he didn't want to get into acting because he's the son of fucking Spartacus himself.
Kirk Douglas. Who didn't Kirk Douglas just die, or am I imagining? He
died about 2 years ago, but he did die at the he did die young at the age of 102.
Yeah,
he was fucking. The guy was older than film itself. But yeah, he didn't want to be on screen initially. He wanted to be a producer, and so he threw his money behind *One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest*. But then decided, oh, okay, I'll get into.
Okay, I'm gonna be on.
I'll be good.
I'm gonna do it. Billboard Top 100. It releases right in between the changeover between "Mo Money, Mo Problems" by Biggie.
Good track.
And the following week is "Honey" by Mariah Carey. And in the news, it's a big time period for the UK.
Oh boy!
Because
is this the Good Friday Agreement? Oh no, that's 98.
No, it's right after the funeral for Princess Diana.
Oh yeah.
And right before, actually, the day of, Scotland votes for devolving the Parliament, and 2 weeks later, Wales follows suit. So There you go.
All thanks to Hexen II and.
All thanks to Hexen II, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland had gained, and London, for some reason, gained some sort of slight self-autonomy.
I guess London kind of makes sense, though, because they always it was a big enough kind of municipality anyways that they had their own biases,
They got their own shit going on.
Yeah, exactly. Biggie's an interesting one, though, because that's going to be like his first #1 hit after passing away, right?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because it's mostly, even though obviously it's a Biggie track, it's Puff, which not to dead name P. Diddy, but that was what he was going by at the time.
Right, written by Biggie, Steve Jordan, Mason Betha, and Sean Combs. Who later produced the song. And Notorious B.I.G.
Because I'm pretty sure... it's on...
He died earlier that year. It was March of that year that he dies. And this comes out in... this is released in July and hits top of the charts at some point in... it was September when it hit the top of the charts.
Jeez. Because what was the name of the album it was on? It was not Afterlife, but it was Life After Death or something like that.
Life After Death was the name of the album.
Yeah, like a ton of stuff came off that. But it was so weird because it was an early example of, you remember the Michael Jackson album that Timbaland did after he passed away, where they just used studio leftovers to construct new songs?
Right. Yeah. Oh, and the song featured. Yeah, the song did feature Puff Daddy and Mace.
There we go.
And there it is.
They were all on Bad Boy Records at the time. That was the name.
It just calling it Life After Death. I mean, it just feels so. Looking back.
I mean, it is funny.
It's kind of gross.
You couldn't. I mean, that was the weird thing, is that Puff Daddy's career blew up after Biggie passed, and the two were mates because Puff was on a ton of the tracks on "Ready to Die" were produced by Puff.
Yeah,
and, he's on a lot of them, but not that we're. Tell you what, first the Raven Software Activision buy-in. That's a conspiracy I will buy into. But any Puff Daddy conspiracies, P Diddy conspiracies, we will not be doing those on these podcasts. Not at all.
No, we're not gonna get into the 90s hip hop battles in this podcast, but we might do a spinoff.
That'll be on Bullet Rhymes. There we go.
Bullet Rhymes. There we go.
It's as they say that when old couples die, they usually go around the same time. Diana and Biggie.
Yeah, they love when
they
No.
like candles in the wind.
Like candles. Yeah. Oh, wow. 1997. It's just a wild year for...
Oh, yeah.
For
I was 6. I'm trying to remember like what I was up to in 97. Probably playing Mario.
I was 13.
Oh, wow. Were you playing Hexen 2?
I wasn't. I was probably playing flight simulators or something like that.
Did you know of Hexen? Oh, I was going to say, so like before doing the podcast, did you know
No,
of
that's
Hexen?
the thing is... Hexen and Heretic, I knew all about them. You know, like Doom, Hexen, Heretic, Quake. Oh, yeah. I was playing the shit out of Quake during that time. But Hexen 2, I don't even know it existed.
No,
I'm not even sure it crossed my mind.
I think that's been the interesting thing in this podcast is that, like, we laid out all of the Raven Software games that we wanted to cover, and only 5 of them I knew. Like,
right.
Heretic and Hexen I knew purely just as those are names that I recognize. The Star Wars games as well, actually. Okay, so more like 6. So the Star Wars games I knew because like I played them as a kid.
You're right.
And then Wolfenstein and Singularity, I knew what those were because they came out like when I was buying games magazines and I was like very much into prototype essay head at this point. I was very much a annoying games facts nerd. I was watching game trailers.
You had thoughts on games. You had thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. I might have had a blog at the time, I don't know, but I was in secondary school and being the annoying essay head to my friends at the time.
Yeah.
But
that's wonderful.
Is it really? Is it really wonderful, or is it? God,
it's wonderful in a way, knowing where it ended up.
I guess so.
It was
Social Fortune.
I can imagine Lil James saying like actuallying somebody about a video game.
Yeah, I will say that I kind of, when I got a shop job, I mellowed out a lot on that kind of stuff. To the extent that maybe I would have been a more popular video essayist if I hadn't mellowed out so much. If I was more contentious in my views, maybe I wouldn't have. But yeah, so Social Fortune didn't even know it existed before we started doing this.
Sure.
Quake 4, literally, neither of us knew that it was a Raven Software game up until we're about to record the first episode, and I go, oh, maybe we should do Quake 4 because this is
oh yeah
culturally important.
They did a Quake game.
Yeah, exactly. And Star Trek Elite Forces. You could have told me they made it. Well, actually, no. I didn't even remember. Like, I watched the LGR video on it, and it left my brain immediately afterwards. Apart from,
right?
Oh, they made a game in the Quake engine. Oh, okay, cool.
Interesting.
Hexen 2, I would say, is a perfect example of that in regards to I didn't know Hexen had a sequel that was made in the Quake engine, and after playing it, I have my own thoughts on maybe why it has been forgotten.
Yeah.
But we'll do heaven and hell here. People at home, imagine me and Kevin are on your shoulder. Kevin is wearing a white robe with a halo above his head. He's playing a harp. Meanwhile, I'm in a red bodysuit with plastic horns on my head and a little pitchfork. That's how we're going to approach Hexen 2. So first, Kevin, I would like you to lay out your positive thoughts on this game.
Okay, so positive thoughts. It's very much prototypical. Kingsfield is out at the time, so that's one of From Software's first games. And if you're looking at Dark Souls and all the Souls likes and all that stuff, you could trace a lineage all the way back to their first works with Kingsfield. I want to say that Hexen 2 very much fits into that mold of the first-person RPG, but actually plays well as compared to Kingsfield, which if you go back and play Kingsfield, it feels like playing a potato.
Yeah.
It's like holding a potato and imagining that you're playing a first-person game.
It's a PS1 game, which I think is... What's interesting, especially with the Japanese developers, at this point, they haven't had a ton of polygonal experience stuff, and in the stuff that they have, it's either been supplementary in regards to, like, Star Fox or Yoshi's Island, where it's kind of back into other stuff, or it's arcade games where it's very much spectacle stuff. Not that I'm saying the spectacle is
and
hollow, but it's a very different style. It's not very
Right.
simulationist, essentially.
Yeah, and Japanese devs also don't tell many stories from the first-person perspective.
That is true.
A lot of times, it does go more into light gun territory. Talk like Sega's House of the Dead series. Sega did House of the Dead, right?
That's great.
Yes. But yeah, so this is a first-person hack and slash-ish RPG that FromSoft makes in the mid '90s. Maybe I want to say 2 years before this comes out.
Sure.
I want to say 1995. Let's say. Not to Ben Shapiro it, but let's say that.
Let's say, hypothetically, that in 1995...
Let's say hypothetically, 1995. So 97 comes out. You have Hexen II. I'm going back and playing it, never having heard of it before. Having heard of Hexen, knowing Hexen very well from being a kid, not having played, but knowing enough about it. And Hexen 2 is surprisingly refreshing in my mind because it's non-linear in a way where you have a very open area to explore, puzzles to solve. There isn't a ton of combat. There's combat,
yes,
but it's not like it's not overwhelming you.
No,
like it's not like Heretic, where you first open up. When you first start playing Heretic, and you're being swarmed by the little imp dudes.
Yeah, it's not the Doom design where every time you walk into a room, there's 8 guys. 8 guys that you have to take out.
8 guys.
Big guys in the rooms that you have.
No, these big dudes. So you're wandering around and you're trying to solve puzzles. Occasionally there's these golems that seem almost unstoppable wandering around too. And I just thought it was a really fun exploration of what a first-person RPG-ish, sim-ish game could be in the mid-90s using the Quake engine.
I was going to throw you a bone here, because this comes out the year before Thief the Dark Project. And in a lot of weird ways, this kind of almost feels not like a prototype version of it, but much kind of like how Heretic... well, I guess more so Cyclones comes out the same year as... Well, actually, no, more so Wolfenstein 3D comes out the same year as Ultima Underworld, and they're both first-person games, but they go in different directions with it, where one is very much an evolution on the dungeon maze-style game, where you have inventory and stuff like that, while the other one is Bang Bang Soda Pop John Carmack game. And then you have Heretic, which almost kind of... Well, no, more so the Black Crypt tries to marry these two styles together, where you have a little bit of the dungeon game, and you have a little bit of
a little bit of the shooting.
And so Hexen 2 almost gets back to that in regards to, you do see a little bit of what they will eventually refine and do better in... Well, I say better. Obviously, Thief is its own thing. It's more kind of... Well, it's the...
It's almost like the ideas are there, even if the developers weren't even 100% aware of them.
Yes.
Because, let me be clear, Hexen 2 is not an ImSim at all.
Not.
It just has the vibes of one, where it's like, with just continuing down a thought process a little bit longer, it could have been one. There's no stealth. It's not a stealth game. It's not like you can solve a problem in a different way. Like two of the things that I think are very necessary for immersive sims are multiple ways to engage to solve a problem. So there's only one way to ever solve problems in Hexen 2, and that's the prescribed way that you have to do it. But it does feel like they were close but no potato.
Yes. I'll kind of dig into this a little bit when I start to Scottie Pippen dunk all over this game. But
yes.
But I do appreciate the fact that, again, it has the ambitions of Hexen 1, where they're trying to do... And again, I think this is so much what early Raven is defined by, which is Quake and Doom are very good at being straightforward action FPS games, but can we expand the scope of them to show off, no, we can make these more like RPGs and kind of have these prototypical in-sim elements in there, and have like, again, like solutions which aren't just shooting people. They try and expand a little bit from there. But yeah, I mean, I will get into my thoughts in a second, but it is just kind of like, just from a pure, like, from what they had to work with, and the fact that this was made, I don't know if crunch was involved, but the fact that Activision did say to them, scope this back from what you were originally planning, this is impressive, what they have, like, managed to make.
Yeah, and I would be very interested in playing Heretic 2, just to kind of get a fuller picture of what is present in Heretic 2, and what would have been like if these two games
were combined.
What Captain Planet emerges from.
I mean, I was gonna say, because with my initial playthrough of the game, I was a little bit like, will it feel like this is half a game and this is the other half? And again, will I feel like I'll have a more robust picture from the end of it? But from getting further on in Hexen 2, it's like, no, this is fleshed out. This is essentially, what if we made Hexen 1, but we had full polygonal environments. And it's funny, because kind of in Hexen 1, it doesn't feel like it is hamstrung by the Doom engine. It feels like they're doing so many interesting things with it, versus Hexen 2, which almost feels a bit like Heretic, where they have this new engine to play with, and it almost feels like they're having more fun doing, like, haha, we've made a table and chairs out of simple polygon blocks. Oh, we have hey, look, it's a big barn. It's a big bale of hay and like stuff. Like, it feels like they've made these houses and like this little town out of the most rudimentary 3D stuff. And again, like Heretic, it is absolutely adorable. It feels like digital Lego in regards to...
They feel like they really put a lot of love into the... like one of the puzzles is like, oh, you have to extinguish the fire in the fireplace and then climb up the chimney and get to a special room up on the second floor, and because the door is locked through the chimney, and it's like, it's adorable.
My favorite example of that is, and again, it shows like, this is very much like, it's all part of the trilogy of Heretic, Hexen 2, where it is, well, what can we do in the Doom engine in regards to like, you have the shooting, but then what else do you do in a Doom game? Collect keys, press buttons. And so they're like, okay, well, those aren't really puzzles, but can we like add enough like if and then statements and complexity to them that it almost starts to look like a puzzle or like a RPG style adventure? And so in Heretic, I like that because they do, the key cards of Doom are literally like, oh, you have the scroll that will open the door. And it's like, wow, amazing that how you're able to dress this up. But then Hexen 2 goes the extra step of the keys that you pick up in Quake, they turn them into actual items. And like, Quake has like bits where you have to read bits of text, but it's not like BioShock where like you're reading information as you go.
There's no audio logs.
Absolutely not. This is like probably a simple pop-up system that like John Carmack put in where he probably told him, no, only use this for like for telling the player, go, this is the next level you're walking into, and they go, oh no, but we could use this to like give lore to the players and stuff like that. And the mission that you go on is to collect a bone of a dead warlock to turn it into bone meal to make a potion. And the way that you turn it into bone meal is that you have to take it to a mill, and in order to open the mill, you need the mill key. And so, like, it makes your game design brain go like, okay, so I mean, this is only gonna appeal to maybe myself. I don't think there's anyone who listens to this podcast who knows like e-learning software, but in Articulate Storyline, how you set up triggers and stuff is purely if and then statements. So if user has clicked this button, then play this audio clip, essentially. And so I can just imagine the people at Raven Software being like, okay, if player has picked up bone, then flag that they can now do this part of the mission. If player has picked up key and bone is flagged, let them be able to open door to mill. And so in a game where you literally don't have a button to push buttons, it is literally you walk up to a button and it just activates, because that's how Quake... Because the point of Quake is that you're never stopping to fiddle with the keyboard. You are literally just moving and shooting constantly. Right. They have it so, like, if you stand in the relative area of where this door is, it goes, oh, you're here. I'll open the door for you. And then just, like, just an animation of a cube rotating along its axis to open the door. And it is, it is adorable, because, you throw the bone in, and it goes, oh, you have to leave the mill to see where the bone dust is, wink, wink, because it is purely just loading in different levels whenever you go into interiors, and so you leave, if bone meal flags, then when they enter level E1M1, add new key bone meal. And so, and again, it's like really cute what they're able to take what are essentially really simple flagging text stuff, but through the fantasy setting and the, and these little bits of text stuff that they can do, they elevate it from Quake into something which is, again, it's a dark fantasy, it's a fantasy adventure game, much like Hexen and Heretic were. And I think, really ambitious for the time, really nice. Now, here's the bit where I start to shit on it. I wish that stuff was easy to figure out, because there are bits of that game that suck in regards to figuring out how to get ahead, which never had the problem in Heretic, because Heretic is literally, it's a Doom game. You go from A to B, and there may be a little bit of spaghetti in the middle where you have to pick up keys, but the levels are... John Romero was at the wheel and said, well, this part of the level should flow them to key 1, and then key 1 should lead them to lock 1, and blah, blah, and, they keep going back to the same places, but it opens up more and more. And it should change every time they unlock something, like bring out an enemy, and the enemy comes from a place to make them go, hey, I'm going to go in this direction. Hexen has a tiny bit of that, but not as much as I would have liked. Hexen 2 is... I was about 20 minutes into the game before I loaded up a walkthrough, because there's a bit where you have to sneak into the castle, and the portcullis is up, so you have no idea how to get in. And I have a look at a walkthrough, and it goes, oh, you're meant to blow up the grating. And I was like, what? And under the water, there is a grating which looks damaged, but it also just looks like a solid 3D object, like every single thing else in the game. So how was I meant to look at that and infer that, well, I guess because it looks broken, that means that I could shoot it and that will blow it up. And there are Zelda 1 style walls in that game which look like every single other wall, but you need to know that, yes, you can break that to knock it in. To go back to the in-sim stuff, there's a bit where the stairs are out, and I was like, okay, how do I get up there? Couldn't jump far enough, and then I went, oh, I wonder if I could cheese this by pushing a barrel there and jumping off the barrel up to the stairs. I could, and I went, oh, well, I feel a bit dodgy for doing that. No, in the walkthrough,
that's how you're supposed to do it.
That's how you're meant to do it. And so it does, it has the in-sim thing of you can come up with
move a box.
You can come up with crafty solutions for stuff, because again, like that's always my thing of, well, it's only really an in-sim game if you can put barrels on top of each other to skip over a wall and get to the next part of the level. That's the intended solution here, and it is
It's not obvious.
That's fucking bold,
because
Cotton. You know,
it's not obvious that you're supposed to do that. So, yeah. Here's the thing. I totally agree. I think I'm more. I agree with everything you're saying. I think I'm more swayed by the that they tried.
No, yeah, you're giving it the benefit of the doubt, and I think
the fact that they never set up the fact that you can do that anywhere, like you can to things around, but it's never set up as a solution, a possible solution. There's
never the Nintendo thing of the Metroid thing of they put you in a room and you can only leave once you figure out you can do something. It's something that you can go the entire game with never finding out about it until you get to this one part, and even then, they never lock you in a room until you figure out how to do it. Because
there's like multiple ways out of that room, so you just assume that that's not the way you're supposed to go.
Exactly, yeah. It's still got again, it's not quite an instant because it has still got not even Quake level design. It is like Doom level design in regards to, especially the little market town where it's all just big loops and stuff. But
right,
it has the thing of, say, and again, if you've never played a video game before, here's a hot tip from me. If you're never quite sure which way to go, look where the enemies are, and just go to wherever the enemies are, and that's probably the way ahead. The moment you kill all the enemies in Hexen 2, which again, impressive feat that you can leave a level and come back and it will remember that you killed enemies there. Again, nice little bit of continuity, makes it feel more like a real world. But you come back to a level and you have no idea what you're doing, you can't figure out the way ahead until, again, open up a walkthrough and go, okay.
Yeah. And the one thing about Hexen 2, because I think I played into it a little bit further. It does have different, it has like different worlds that you travel to. Which Hexen, the second level of Hexen 2, is a little bit more, I want to say it feels a little bit more Quake-y.
A bit more straightforward.
In terms of its design. There's only one moment I had to look at a walkthrough to figure out what was going on. But yeah, it is. And the main thing I'll hit it for in terms of combat is that it's not like there's a shit ton of combat in the game.
No.
There are times in level 2 where there's a decent amount, and some of the enemies are they come up on you and you're like, oh, these are more difficult than I expected. My main issue was the bosses that I fought against.
Raven's can't make a boss fight to save their life, unfortunately. So,
because they're like the Four Horsemen.
Yes.
And so they're flying around this map, and you're basically just running around. They're really hard to hit because they're flying.
Love a flying enemy in an FPS.
Yeah, love a flying enemy, and you can get things that allow you to fly and fly around after them and things like that. But they're not fun boss fights. They take forever to fight through. Not great balance. So anyway, that was those. After the second boss that I killed, I was like, I think I'm done.
Yeah, I completed the first world much like I did with Hexen, and I felt like I kind of like, if the game is just this 3 more times, I know what that feels like. I have had my fill. You know, I didn't say this on the Hexen or Heretic episodes that we did, and I'm going to say it now because it very much applies here. I don't particularly like the feel of combat in any of these games, and I think it's purely down to, I don't know whether it's because they're doing magic or because they haven't quite figured out how melee feels yet, but it doesn't.
Right.
The enemies feel too spongy. There's not enough nice feedback to it.
Yeah, this enemies are spongy, and the magic feels like it's too ephemeral.
Yeah.
Of a reaction to feel like it's doing things.
Yeah, I think it's something that, like, in the next game they fix immediately, Soldier of Fortune, because it is, not only is it real-world weapons and enemies, but the enemies, well, it doesn't feel like a Doom game, it feels more like a Rainbow Six game, but playing with those enemies feels more punchy and a bit smarter. But just the weapons themselves also just feel a hell of a lot better versus here, where, again, although I really love the fact that Raven Software go, well, Doom, shotgun, minigun, whatever, we got magic in our game, and magic can be anything. It doesn't have to be a mortar-style weapon or a pistol-style weapon. It could be, like, it splits in three, or it, like, homes, and, you know, it's the imagination to do all sorts of great things, but it just doesn't feel great. And just the enemies, again, the way the enemies react to it doesn't feel super great as well. I will say, though, it is something that has been... Maybe it's because of my console head for a lot of this stuff. It's weird that they never invented a mouse which had a rumble pack in it. Because I feel like having that little bit of...
Yeah!
Little bit of vibration feedback does go a long way to making...
A little bit of tactile feedback on the mouse. That would actually be... That's a good idea. We should write to who would do that?
Oh my god!
Razor,
can we patent that? Can we patent that on the folks? Don't go to the post office. Don't patent. Like, we're gonna patent this.
Don't patent our Rumble mouse.
Yeah, we're gonna patent the Rumble mouse and the Rumble keyboard, where underneath certain keys you get forced. Oh yeah, we could have them like, you know, the triggers on the PS5 where they have a little bit of resistance to them. What if we had that on like WAS and D, so it feels like you're walking through like mud and stuff like that? Oh, that'd be
love
dope.
it.
Oh yeah, and then we have the Rumble mouse. But you know what? I'm laughing at the idea of just like you have the Rumble mouse and it's designed for games, but it's like somebody.
But then you have it on directly. You're like trying to do PowerPoint or something like that.
Yeah,
and you're like dragging something in position. It's like shaking as you're dragging items.
Somebody writes a plugin for Excel where it's like you click on a cell and it's like shooting a shotgun. It's just like boom, boom, boom. But it is the funny
level up Excel.
the Logitech Rumble mouse. It is funny though. Like it is weird that, like, again, the only thing where you get a little bit of force feedback, I guess, would be the Thrustmaster, the joysticks of the time, because I imagine they had a little bit of, you know, to try and recreate like pulling up on a plane, they'd have a little bit of like restriction to that, but. Yeah, it's just weird. Like, and it's funny because I remember talking to I reviewed Treasure Tech, which was a Wario Land 4 inspired mod for Doom, and I remember the creator saying, "Did you play this with a controller?" And I was like, I thought he was making a thing of like, oh, you know, I was a noob and I had like shit skills, but what he was saying is like, no, I designed the weapons around using a mouse. It's meant to have like specific feedback for that. And so since then I'm like, oh right. And like I've tried to keep an eye out in games of, are guns like tuned around a mouse? And
right,
again, like Hexen II is an old game. As much as I'm dunking on it, I do have to remember that this is a game that came out before Thief the Dark Project. This is a game that came out a year after Quake 1. It's not going to be perfect. Quake 1, I think, has aged wonderfully, even though I don't particularly love playing it. But I should also take into the fact that Hexen 2 is very much a game of its time. But even in those respects, it's funny that Raven Software have this whole thing of their games are very ambitious, but they don't quite nail the little things that id do, which I think is what takes those, again, it's an invisible art. It's like one of those things that you don't notice when they're there, but you do notice when they're not there.
You feel it when they're not there. Yeah.
Which I think is as cool as Hexen 2 is in regards to, you have this like little town that you can like keep returning to, and it has genuine shops and little bits of like minutia in there. Just the sheer act of a first-person shooter where you are shooting stuff doesn't feel great, which I think is
it's a problem. The shooting needs to feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, again, the game does kind of back itself up by, well, I guess we have better puzzles than Quake. Although... that's their back-of-the-box core. Better puzzles than Quake.
Better puzzles than Quake.
Better puzzles than Quake.
And it's almost like something like... It's like we're doing something better than Quake wasn't even trying to do.
No, exactly. It's like we have better shooting than we have better dialogue options than Mario Kart 8, and it's like
we have better shooting than Myst.
yeah, there you go. we have better kart racing than The Last of Us, and it's like okay, yeah.
I mean, God, that would probably make me play The Last of Us all the way through. Is if there's a cart.
I mean, in fairness, that used to be Naughty Dog's thing. Was they do the triple and then they give you the racing game spin-off. They did the free Crashes, and then they did Crash Team Racing. They did the free Jacks.
When's Last of Us? Yeah, when Last of Us Kart Racer.
When are we getting when are we getting the Fast of Us? That's what I want to know.
The Fast.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling it. The Fast of Us. And the picture is going to be... It's going to be Abby, it's going to be Joel, it's going to be Ellie, it's going to be all your favourite characters in it. It's going to like
all your favorite characters.
Races. But there's still going to be like...
They'll be back.
There's going to be like 20-minute cutscenes between races where it's just like, I don't know if I can live much longer. Every day it's just...
I can handle this.
I just
struggles.
I lose more and more of my humanity with each person.
Are humans the real monsters?
And then it just cuts to boop, boop. and you're racing around the pirate ship track. But yeah, like all the tracks don't like all the levels.
There's giraffes for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. There. Oh yeah, all of the rather than having item boxes like in Mario Kart, you have scrap boxes, and you have to make the items through a crafting menu while driving. There we go. That's my God, we're just coming up with all sorts of great ideas today. We got the Rumble Mouse, that's one.
Rumble Mouse, Fast of Us.
Yeah, crafting while doing your driving. So again, that all came out of playing Hexen 2, folks. This is such a great game for generating ideas for other games.
If you really want your brain to start thinking about what could make this and other games better, play Hexen 2.
Yeah.
That's the official bullet time seal of approval.
One last thing I was going to mention, which ended up my sort of thing changed on this, because initially I was going to say that Hexen 2 is kind of where you start to see the brain drain happen at Raven Software, because people start to leave and go elsewhere. But it turns out it's the next game that we're covering, that is more true. Even though I don't feel that's the game that has brain... If anything, that game is... well, we'll get into it when we talk about it, but... So...
That is brain gain.
That is, yeah, that's got too much brain in that game.
It's got too much brain.
It's got too much brain spilling out of people's ears.
Alex Jones, like some sort of Alex Jones brain pill.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a game that's taken too much Brain Force Plus. That's right.
Yes.
But so while most of the team are working on Hexen 2, the original Heretic and Hexen team are working on Mage Slayer instead, including Chris Reinhardt, who, to know, was kind of like Romero got on quite well with Reinhardt while they were working on Heretic and Hexen, and he leaves to form Ion Storm, and then after Mage Slayer comes out, Chris leaves and decides to form a new company in Madison, Wisconsin called Human Head Studios, which later takes on a lot of the developer talent from Raven Software, including Ben Goki, who is one of the programmers on the original Heretic and Hexen, and a lot of the ideas that they had for that game ended up getting carried into the stuff that they would then make at Human Head, including Rune, but more importantly to this podcast, and the game that we will cover at some point, Prey. And by Prey, I don't mean the Bethesda game Prey that came out 5 years ago. I mean the game that came out 15 years ago that, depending who you ask, that's the real Prey in some people's eyes.
Yeah, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
It's they either like Prey or they like Prey.
Yeah, exactly. It's
but some people like both Preys.
It's like ketchup and ketchup, it's two very different things.
Yeah.
Gosh. I will say that there is a game that we will be talking about relatively soon where I think Prey 2006 is a much better example of what it was going for, but we will
sure
dip into that nearer the time. Final thoughts then, I guess. Hexen 2. I wasn't as... If anything, I've warmed up more to it talking to you about it than I did actually playing it.
You like it in concept.
Yeah, I love the concept of Hexen 2 more, and especially I love the fact that taking into concept of this wasn't what Hexen was... Hexen is a game that doesn't exist, so Hexen could have been the best game ever made. We have no idea. It could have been worse than Hexen 2. Well, we literally do not know because it is not a game that exists. But what
it didn't happen.
But a game that does exist is Hexen 2, which was Activision told them to push this out, make it happen, making another Hexen
and
game.
they did.
And in that respect, and the fact that it is this trend of Raven trying to make really ambitious stuff in this really early id tech, it is cool. But
yeah,
it is also, in that ambition, has come at the cost of a lot of the straightforwardness that you can appreciate from something like Quake and eventually something like Half-Life, where they figure out how to do those puzzles that make you feel really smart, but you never feel lost figuring them out.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the things I like to, as you said, it comes out before Thief, comes out the year before Thief, comes out 2 years before System Shock 2. So I feel like it kind of has a good, like, the ideas are in the water.
Yeah.
People are thinking of these things in terms of the way you interact in the space and the world and all that stuff. But yeah, clearly the shooting is not, the combat is not the best.
No.
The level design is not super interesting. I feel like the first world is the worst.
Yeah.
And then I think beyond that it gets better and more interesting. But it's still not as fun or as engaging as something like Quake was. So yeah, I think it. I give it a lot of credit for what it tried to do.
Yeah.
Even if in execution it's a little bit.
I would say of most of the stuff that we've covered on this is more of an interesting curiosity rather than something to return to. That being said, still very easy to get hold of. It's on Steam. It's on Good Old Games. Probably the GOG version is a little bit more user-friendly to get running, including the fact that it does come with Portal of Previs, which is... Actually, no, the GOG version doesn't. This was an expansion pack that was designed for Hexen 2, which was just added more weapons and more levels and expanded it out. Very hard to... you can't get it from any storefront, but relatively easy to find and patch into the game. Hexen still has pretty big fan support behind it, so still very well supported in that respect. But yeah, it's, again, as I kind of said earlier on, where it's like there's a bunch of games for the Raven mini-series where I knew going in, and then some I didn't know existed. And I think in Hexen 2's case, it was very, like... It was cool to see this as almost like the bridging point between old Doom-style Raven stuff and where they would eventually go and kind of embrace the Quake engine stuff. But beyond that, I don't know. It didn't rock my boat. Wanted to maybe I love it, and I love the concept of it more than I did actually playing it.
Sure.
That being said, though, people at the time really did like this game. Edge said that praised the game for being different from other Quake engine-based games, highlighting its inventive and interactive levels, enemy variety, and artificial intelligence. What artificial intelligence? I'm wondering in this game.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, the enemy AI is
it's Quake. They run, they strafe, they shoot.
They run. They know where you are, and they are coming for you.
If they're the little gargoyle guys, they just buzz around your head like a fly, and you lose damage. It's not exactly fear, folks. It's not it won't be winning against Gary Kasparov anytime soon in a game of chess. That's for sure. No. Rob Dolan for GameSpot. The first of the highly scrutinized Quake killers to hit store shelves, Hexen II delivers a mighty blow, but ultimately fails to knock the king off his throne. Make no mistake, Hexen II is a game with many strengths. Its design is superior to the original Hexen. It has significant payoff for single players winding through its twisted corridors, and visually, it is without equal in the action genre. But the game's attempt to break from standard first-person shooter mode has some nasty side effects, and the end result is a confusing and often frustrating difficult experience. Again, I think pretty much...
I mean, that's a pretty good spot-on review.
It is a summation of... He was saying in 97 what we're now saying in 2022. We are very much feeling the same. And
I think it's a weird. I think by the way, I think it's funny that it's like being positioned as like it's the Quake killer or something like that, and like behind the scenes, it's like it's using the Quake engine. It's not like they're trying to. They're just building on Quake. They're not. It's a competition between. They're not having a competition.
It's a friendly rivalry. Yeah, it is very much. Yeah. They're just one-upping each other. And again, like there's very much. There's a lot in Hexen which probably did inspire Quake. I mean, the portal system that it has and its more vertical orientated design. And I imagine that Hexen 2 might have inspired a lot of like Quake 2. Not so much in its thematics, but again, they're very much learning from each other, so it is funny that they do position it as a Quake killer. Just for some additional context, by the way, what other FPS games was this going up against? Well, this is very much the year where we see the transition from raycasted games to proper polygonal games, because this comes out the same year as Blood, which is like maybe the best build engine game, which I know is such a weird qualifier to say. Like, it's honestly saying, it's the best it's the best taco place in this particular area, and it's like, okay. But Blood is a very solid game, I will give it that. And again, it has quite a lot of that Hexen feel to it, of they're doing a lot more ambitious stuff in it than a lot of build games did. But it also comes out the same year as Shadow Warrior, which is the most ambitious build game in its racism. They never quite reach those levels ever again. They push it as hard as they can.
They really hit that. They really built in the races.
Oh yeah, they did. They said, "How far can we take this? Let's really squeeze this for all it's worth." But then on the 3D side of stuff, GoldenEye 007 comes out this year, which a very important game in regards to a upcoming bullet time series, but also just in regards to console FPS games. If it wasn't for GoldenEye 007, I probably wouldn't be into FPS games. Not because I played GoldenEye first, but Halo doesn't exist without it. Halo Combat Evolved is where I start with that. And
FPSs are a unicorn on consoles.
At this point,
kind of like a curiosity. And then you have GoldenEye comes out, and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, you can do an FPS on
we can make this." Yeah, you figured out that the analog stick is like the perfect implementation for making FPS games work, and then Sony has the brilliant idea of, what about 2?
What if we have 2 analog sticks?
And they figure out that, oh, this is the perfect way to do circle strafing. Yes, absolutely. This is how we will do FPS games for the rest of time. And alongside that, Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, which is the prequel to 2 games that we will be covering very soon on Bullet Time on this podcast. Which, again, is, funnily enough, the original Dark Forces, they're trying to make their own Doom engine. And then Dark Forces 2, they try and do their own Quake engine. And I don't know, to some success, maybe not so much that they decide to use it for future games, but it is, I know it's cool. Like, again, it's how do we evolve on the design of the previous one, but also within the line of how do we make a more Star Warsy Star Wars game, to the extent of, well, what did the last one not have? Jedis. Well, this is the Jedi game, baby.
Let's get some Jedi in there, baby.
Let's give you a lightsaber and see how you get on. Speaking of seeing how we're going to get on, let's wrap up the podcast with everyone's favourite segment, I hope. We're going to be talking... We're doing the box office game, and by the box office...
Let's do some box office games.
Oh, speaking of boxes, actually, we didn't talk about the cover box for this game, which I don't think is as good as Heretic nor Hexen.
It's not.
It looks like... It looks like a shit. It looks like a bad tattoo. That is.
You know what I think of? Hold on. What am I? Okay. You know what I think of when I see the Hexen II box art is that stupid photo that Ricky Gervais took of him crucified with a mic stand, and he has atheist written across his chest because he is the biggest dumb martyr in the history of stand-up comedians.
Oh Jesus!
Can you put him on the Hexen 2?
I'm gonna make a reminder for myself to Photoshop the Hexen 2 box art to put the Ricky Gervais fucking atheist picture there instead. Oh, that's so bad. Oh, folks, we've killed Kevin from PixelLit, unfortunately.
I'm dying.
He's dying of atheism. Oh, we're gonna have to get through the quiz as quickly as possible.
Let's get through that quiz.
Right. So once again, we don't have any sales data from before 2004, and this is a game that came out in '97. So instead, Kevin, I am going to ask you what the best-selling home console games were for 1997. Now, once again, Hexen 2 didn't make the list, even though it's a PC game, doesn't count. But according to Eric Bethick, Hexen 2 was commercially unsuccessful with sales slightly above 30,000 units, so probably wouldn't have made the list either way. But what I'm going to ask you, Kevin, is that we got 5 here, and number 1 is an entry from a long-running RPG series.
Final Fantasy VII.
Final Fantasy VII selling 3.4 million copies in Japan and 1.5 million in the US. That is some big numbers, folks.
That is huge.
Number 2 on the list is another long-running RPG series, but it is the first entries in it.
It is the first entry in this RPG series.
Yes.
Ooh. And it's a good. It's a JRPG?
I mean, it is an
RPG.
It is an RPG game made developed in Japan. Yep. Whether I would call it a JRPG is a bit...
Sure.
Yeah, that's my other clue, where does it fall on the JRPG spectrum?
Right. 1997... I don't know. What's the developer?
The developer is a... Oh, if I give you the developer, you're going to get it immediately. So what I'm going to say is that this is their first mega hit. Before this, they were doing, like, they had put out a platform game on the Sega Mega Drive. They had maybe done an RPG series as well, but this is their first time making it a Game Boy game.
This is their first time making a Game Boy game, and it's a game. It's a game. It's a Game Boy game. It's Pokemon, right?
It is Pokemon, but
so 1997. It's going to be Pokemon Red.
yes, and
What was it? Red and Green.
yeah, red and green in Japan, but as we know it over in the United States and the rest of the world, red and blue. Sells
Red and blue.
3.9 million units in Japan. An even bigger hit than Final Fantasy VII, if you can believe it.
Wow, huge.
Number 3 in the charts is, if you are a fan of video game charts, this is usually a non-mover from the top 5, and this game is no exception.
Madden.
Not a Madden. No, don't think Madden and don't think Wii Sports, but think in that general. What's something that is still like number 5 in the top 5 of the charts, like even today?
Even today, top 5 in the charts. It's not FIFA.
Nothing. It's not sports adjacent.
It's not.
but
Is it?
Yeah.
It's sports adjacent.
Yeah, it's technically a genre that you could argue is in the sports genre, but not particularly this one.
Okay. So it's not like. Give me a hint.
I'll give you a clue. The series got its start on the Super Nintendo.
Series got its start on the Super Nintendo. Is it kart racing
It is kart racing.
game? Is it Mario Kart?
It is Mario Kart 4.
It would be the Mario Kart 64.
Mario Kart 64. 731,000 copies in Japan, 1.5 million in the US.
Really snapped it up in the US.
I know, this is the start of Mario Kart's reign on the charts. May it reign gloriously forever and ever.
May it reign gloriously.
Number 4 in the charts is Mitch Kramer Heavy-Eye's favorite game of all time.
Oh, well, Outer Wilds wasn't released yet.
No, it wasn't.
And it's not Zelda 2.
No, I think the only person who would say that is Rasputin.
It's Rasputin.
Yeah, that's his favorite game of all time.
Oh, God. Mitch's favorite game of all time. What can you narrow it down for me a little bit? What's the
sure.
What's the genre?
It's an
here?
I would say it's an N64 game.
It's an N64 game.
Yeah, if I give you the genre, I think it might make it a bit too
It might
obvious.
be a bit trivial.
Yeah.
Um,
It's an N64
I feel like we were just
exclusive,
talking about it,
by
too.
the way.
N64 exclusive.
Yes.
It's not 1080.
No, it's not. No. Think bigger than 1080.
Think bigger. I feel like we were just talking about this.
This
on Discord,
this
too.
series also
And-
got its start on the SNES. In fact, I mentioned this game during the podcast, which I mentioned a lot of games during the podcast, but this was more.
You did mention a lot of games during the podcast, but I don't remember 5 minutes ago. So
Fair enough. I mentioned this game in regards to there had been 3D games previously.
okay, there had been 3D games previously.
So the thing, SNES game might have some 3D technology within it.
Is it Donkey Kong 64?
It is not Donkey Kong 64. That is still 2 years out. No, this is...
Oh, God.
Interesting fact. This is the game that advertised and was bundled with the Rumble Pack in the United States.
Wave Race?
No, not Wave Race.
I got no idea.
No, okay, I'll give you a clue, and then I'll probably give it away. Stars a cast of anthropomorphic animals.
Oh, okay. Star Fox 64.
Sells 373,000 copies in Japan, 1.5 million in the United States, and then
You know, it's wild to think, like, Star Fox is such a big gap in my own knowledge. It's because it's I think it's always performed better than something like Metroid.
Yes.
But to me, Metroid has gotten more
prestige.
It's got more prestige
Yeah.
than Star Fox does.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think, like, and it's funny because, like, Star Fox is, like, the more innovative game versus, like, Metroid, Metroid is good, but I guess Prime really kind of put it on a pedestal, you know?
Yeah, it did, I think. That transition to 3D FPS. I mean, and we're still waiting for Metroid Prime 4.
By the time this episode
baby.
comes, I am money bear. By the time this episode goes out, there will be no more Metroid Prime 4 news.
It will not have been announced any further than it has been.
Finally, at number 5, it could be considered one of the greatest video games of all time.
It could be.
It was released the previous year as a launch title for a console.
So, the launch title... So this is 1997 we're talking about,
We're talking
right?
about 97, so this would have been a launch title for a console that came out in 96.
1996. And the PlayStation came out in 1995, didn't
correct.
it? So, the systems, the contemporary systems, would have been the Saturn, which was 1994,
Yes.
and the N64, which would have been 1996.
Correct.
So the launch title would have been Super Mario 64.
361,000 copies in Japan, 1.5 in the US. So this has been
Deductive reasoning, yeah.
if we eliminate all of our answers, only Super Mario 64 exists. Considered by many one of the greatest video games of all time, I think it's pretty good as well. Super Mario 64. Would I play all of these games over Hexen II? Apart from Final Fantasy VII, yeah, probably. Maybe even maybe in Pokemon Red. Actually, I would probably play. I would enjoy Mario Kart 64 more than I would.
Have you ever played Final Fantasy VII?
No, I've tried.
I know you're not much of a.
Not much
You're
into
not much of
RPGs, unfortunately. I have tried.
You're into TT. You're into.
No,
you're
that's
into
the thing. I love
role-playing
tabletop
games.
stuff, but yeah, the Final Fantasy games have never really been my bag. It's
We need a podcast of just you playing an hour of it at a time
God.
and having to react.
I had this awful podcast idea which was going to be like almost like Idiot Abroad, but it was for anime, where you'd have like hosts who are like actual anime fans, but then you would have me. And the idea was that every week I would have to watch like a new anime and basically give my thoughts on it. And like I've only ever seen like 3 animes in my entire life. I have no
Same here.
affinity for that subject
Yeah.
matter at all. But yeah, I don't know. I like the
do it.
idea of doing that for JRPGs. Like, I have to like sit in a room with people who are like hardcore Xenogears fans, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I found it a bit boring. I didn't really get it.
Yeah, we'll just have Dark Fry. We'll just have Dark Fry yell.
Oh
about,
god, yeah, we'll do that for the Xenoblade Chronicles episode. He'll just fucking
Xenoblade Chronicles. He can just yell about it to you, and you can nod.
You know, he had a really funny idea for Bullet Time, which was he wanted to do Danganronpa. Which, do you know what? I was gonna say, do you know that Danganronpa isn't an FPS game, right? It's a visual novel, but
Yeah, it has some segments where you like you have a crosshair that
when
like instead of a mouse pointer, it's a crosshair.
basically
it's like, that doesn't
the
count.
interrogation stuff, which is like Ace Attorney, is done in the fashion of you shoot people say statements and you shoot the contradictionary elements of them with truth bullets.
The only thing I've played Danganronpa for maybe 15-20 minutes,
Right.
and the only thing I really got out of it is the theme music where it says Danganronpa gets stuck in my head
It's got
a few times.
It's got really good music
few
in the
times a
game.
It does, yeah. But, you know, as with anything super anime stylized or whatever, my attention tends to fade.
I honestly, I agree with that mostly. Although I did manage.
And that's why we're hosting a podcast called Bullet Time.
That's why we're doing a podcast called Bullet Time about FES games. Kevin, thank you once again for coming back to talk about Raven Software games. Where anything you'd like to plug before we head off?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at the Arcadeologist, and you can follow my podcast at PixelLit Pod on Twitter and Instagram. PixelLit, we read, recap, and review video game novelizations and other sorts of tie-ins. And you can also check out our website, pixelitpod.com. We're available on all podcast platforms.
Nice. As usual, I've been James. You can find me on Twitter over at HotCyder, HOTCYDER. On the next episode of Bullet Time, we're heading into uncharted territories. This is another Quake engine game, but this is unlike anything Raven did previously, and probably will. Well, actually, it's a weird grim omen of where their careers would eventually end up. But we're talking about 2000's Soldier of Fortune. So I hope you join us again for that. But until next time, folks, keep blasting.
Pew, 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 pew. John Mullins coming in.
The Bullet Time podcast is made possible by Eric Hamilton Schneider, Valerie B, VG, and the HotCyder support tier. If you'd like to help with the production of episodes and gain access to extra content, consider supporting over at patreon.com/HotCyder. That's HOTCYDER. A special thanks to Max Coburn for the Bullet Time theme tune.